Adam, we got another game week, and you and I are kind of running out of things to talk about with this team, and they're 1-9, and obviously another tough one this week. They've lost to the number 8 team 2 weeks in a row. It was number 8 Oregon at the time, number 8 USC last week. Now they get a team that's all the way up to number 15 after beating Oregon this last week. They go out to Washington. They got number 10 Utah next week, so it's a brutal stretch, really for any team. But for this team in particular to have this stretch to close out the season, and again, it's tough to know what to talk about with this team because they're not only losing, but they can't even cover what are huge spreads. 30-plus point spreads are not even covering those routinely. So I don't know what to talk about with this one, but I guess focus on the seniors and things like that, and kind of take a featurey approach a little bit, and kind of celebrate some of these guys that have given their all for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's the one thing you can say in a positive aspect about this program is these guys are still fighting. Yeah. It's crazy to say when you lose a game and you give up, 55-17, and you still look out there and go, I think these guys are trying, Yeah. So, it's tough with these videos at this point because with a lot of the stuff, it's like, am I beating a dead horse here? I don't think JT Shrout can lead this team to a victory against a quality Pac-12 team, but how much do I want to just hammer a kid that is trying? The consistency just isn't there with his game. And I give these coaches and players a lot of credit for, we're still around the program, and you still see coaches trying to keep a positive outlook and smiles on their faces. If I'm in their shoes, I don't know if I could pull that off. So it's impressive that they are still put in all these hours and still competing. But, I also get it from the fan standpoint that really don't care much outside of trying to speculate on who the next head coach is going to be at this point because you, as a fan, your optimism is about the future and not anything we're probably going to see here these next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's where it's tough for us because we're still covering this team, and there's a lot of good kids that we like on this team, and they are trying, but I think a lot of the fans have moved on. I do a weekly chat at Buff Zone, and I was telling my colleague Pat Rooney that my chat this week, I don't remember this ever before, but like during the season, I got more basketball questions, and I don't really cover the basketball team that much, and I got more basketball questions. Now, there's a lot of good things going on with basketball, but I got more basketball questions than I did about this actual team. I mean, the whole chat was about the coaching search and basketball, and I got like 1 or 2 questions about like this week's game and the current team, and that's unusual. I mean, that tells me the fans have moved on. I mean, they're not that interested in this team, and I applaud all these guys. I talked to Frank Phillip, and I said, how is it that you guys are still, staying engaged? And he said, I get it from an outside perspective that people would wonder how we're still caring, but because we do, we love each other. We like playing with each other, and so. But the fans are tired of hearing that stuff, and so they've moved on. But that said, there's still a game we got to cover, and go up to Seattle, and I don't know if this is gonna be a really short video or what, but like, because I don't know what we talk about, but like, it's gonna be a tough one, obviously up there. But what are your thoughts as they go into this game up in Seattle?
Well, it's gonna get ugly again, but I would say leave all expectations at the door as a fan, and try to see some growth out of some of these young guys that are in the program, because if the next head coach can come in and keep a lot of the young guys, especially that 2022 class, that, again, you can hammer on Karl Dorrell and his lack of success here. That's a pretty solid recruiting class that he brought in that got here this last summer. And a lot of those guys have played a lot of football this year. I chatted with Simeon Harris today, who's not a household name among Colorado fans, but he played 70 snaps against USC last week in a nickelback role. He's a skinny freshman. He probably shouldn't be in that role, but he's actually playing pretty well in that role. He's one, if you give any credence to Pro Football Focus's grades, he's graded out as one of their best defensive players this year as a true freshman. You think of guys like Nico Reed and Kalen Moore as veterans. Well, they're true sophomores. Right. If you can bring back Trevor Woods and some of those guys in the secondary, you've got some important pieces there. At one point this season, you had a true freshman at center. quarterback, running back, and your top receiver was a true freshman before he got hurt. So
Right.
those are the things, and I know Owen McCown and Tyson will be playing these next 2 weeks, but kind of focus on some of those young guys in more of the future and realize that it's probably going to get ugly in terms of the scoreboard. But that really is even more so than closing out this 2023 recruiting class leading up to the early sign period. That next head coach needs to sit down with those guys. And on a podcast this week, I really quickly could name 10 to 12 really talented young players that would be the core of this program going forward if they stick around. And so there's some hope with those young guys. But in terms of what we're going to see the next 2 Saturdays, not so much.
Yeah, and there's probably, I would imagine, just because this is the nature of it right now, but I'd imagine there's a lot of talk in the locker room of guys thinking about moving on, and maybe some veteran guys that don't want to have another head coach. But a lot of that is so key on who this next head coach is. 'Cause I think a sit-down conversation with whoever that head coach is could maybe change somebody's mind. If they don't want to go through a change, but you sit down with whoever it is, and they're like, "Wow, I really like that guy." You want to play with him. So it is important. The hire is important. What that guy does in the first, week to 10 days is extremely important, right? Yeah. The other thing I would say is, in addition to, kind of looking at the development of these young guys, there are some veteran guys that are not going to be back after next week. They got 2 games left that, Buff fans maybe try to celebrate some of those guys, like a Brady Russell that, has given his all for 6 years. Alex Fontenot's been through so many ups and downs, but I thought he played one of the best games of his career last week at USC. I mean, that's the Alex Fontenot I've been wanting to see for a long time, the way he ran. If he can run like that over the next 2 weeks, he's going to be fun to watch. Deion Smith is healthy, and so maybe you got that 1-2 punch there with those veteran running backs. And, Quinn Perry, Josh Chandler-Samito, these are guys that have played some good football. Who knows, Terrence Lang won't be back. Who knows if Jalen Sami will come back for his last year. There's a lot of those, kind of veteran guys that we've seen around here for a long time that maybe you kind of celebrate those as well. So I guess if there's things to look for, it's individuals and kind of look for growth and maybe celebrate some of those older guys.
Yeah, and then you look at it, so we're not going to give Colorado a chance to beat Washington this week. Colorado beat Washington last year. Yeah. They bring in a solid head coach in Kalen DeBoer, and they bring in a elite quarterback, and it's amazing how quickly you can improve as a football program. Now it's going to be challenging, trying not to beat a dead horse with the transfer issues here, but it's going to be tough for them to bring in an elite quarterback, but you do that, and all of a sudden, you're talking about a different trajectory for this program. And so Washington is kind of a blueprint for how quickly things can get turned around.
They are, but I would also say, Colorado doesn't necessarily need to go from this to, Pac-12 contender either in 1 year. It's just if you can hit on a guy that's a solid quarterback that maybe wasn't that starter or star at his previous stop, but a guy like a Cam Rising at Utah that, he started his career at Texas but didn't play there before he transferred. If you can find a guy like that just wants another opportunity because he wasn't playing at his other place, and he's pretty good, then you can change things around. But those are topics for another day, right? Because there's so much to go to get through to that point. But and
they've tried. I mean, JT Shroud and Maddox Kopp were transfers, but it just hasn't worked out with those guys.
But you got to hit on it, right? And that's the biggest thing, as we've seen with the transfer portal with CU, is they've missed on a lot of guys. And I would argue. I guess thinking right here, I mean, Josh Chandler-Samito might be the best transfer they've gotten in the last couple of years.
Tommy Brown, maybe.
Tommy Brown. I mean, probably those are the two, right? And outside of that, they've kind of struggled. I mean, Jack Lamb made a couple plays last year, but wasn't really a starter. Robert Barnes has been, up and down a little bit, but not a lot of impact transfers like we're seeing around the conference. I mean, it's amazing watching these last few weeks how many guys are making an impact as transfers on these teams.
They basically just lost to a team of transfers.
Right. Yeah. And the week before that, it was, not quite as much, but it was an Oregon team that was filled with transfers as well. So, you've got to hit in that transfer portal, obviously. We all know that, right? So for this week, neither of us do give the Buffs a shot. What do you think?
Michael Penix is going to throw for a lot of yards. That's what I think. And actually, I was talking to Rod Chance, and the cornerbacks have quietly played pretty good football this year. Most of the yards they've given up have been in the middle of the field in terms of coverage. So I would imagine that the only chance Colorado has is if Washington is just really feeling themselves after beating Oregon, and they have a massive emotional letdown. And you go kind of point back to the first quarter out in L.A. last Friday night. If J.T. Shrout finds Brady Russell and doesn't panic and run into the end zone or throw out of the end zone for a safety, they would have had a little bit more momentum coming out of that first quarter. And USC's still going to come back and win that game at some point, but you got to get that early momentum in the game if you're Colorado, win the turnover margin by a sizable, by 3 or 4. Right. And, again, hope that Washington just doesn't show up to play, but that probably won't happen. I don't know, are we getting into predictions now?
Go ahead.
Colorado has not done a good job. Only 2 wins against the spread all year, right?
I think so, yeah.
So let's go on the other side of that again and say that Washington wins this one 49-17.
Okay. I will say I agree with you on the Washington, whether they're engaged or not. Not only coming off the emotional win against Oregon, who is a bitter rival, but next week they have the Apple Cup. And so, can a team stay emotionally up for 3 weeks in a row? There's really no reason for them to get up for Colorado this week. And so that is the hope, is that they're kind of taking that emotional break this week, and that maybe Colorado can sneak up on them a little bit. But to me, I just don't see this team capable of winning this game. And, other than it's got to be a lot of fluky things. But I think if you catch them emotionally down, that allows you to stay in the game a little bit and maybe cover. I'm going to go with that, and so that's where my optimism lies, is being able to cover. I'm going to go 42-20. Washington wins this one, fairly easily, but the Buffs cover.
Yeah, it's going to be the first road trip that I don't go on this year. Sean Nyhoff is going to travel up there for Buff Stampede. So my favorite road trip in the Pac-12. So I'm kind of bummed out about that, but it was an opportunity for Sean to go out there and see his daughter, and me to be able to do some things back home. So I'll miss you out there, but I hope you have a good trip. Do you like seafood?
I do, yeah. And Seattle's one of my favorite cities.
Yeah.
I won't have you there, but I'm bringing my 12-year-old son Mason. He's coming, so he's excited. So we'll have a fun father-son trip without you. So it'll be fun either way. But we'll be back after the. We'll somehow connect after the game and talk about it.